Learning, let's define learning. Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior or mental state based on experience. When we say relatively permanent change, it implies that it can be altered with future learning. Further, the behavior is a response to situation or event, and the mental state implies knowledge, attitude, beliefs, strategies. Let's talk about the theories of learning. They can be categorized into two major sets. The first is the behavioral or environmental theories. The basis for these theories is that the change in the individual's behavior or the mental state, which was learning, is a response to something in the environment. The controlling thing is the environment, and thus it can be observed directly. The second category of theories is the cognitive theories, and the cognitive theories imply that the change in the individual's behavior or mental state is based on internal mental processes which are not directly observable. The environment is only indirect influence on our behavior or mental states. Thus, the internal states are the legitimate objects of study. We will look into first the environmental or the behavioral theories. They can be of two major categories, the classical conditioning and the operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, given by Ivan Pavlov, a Russian physician or a neurophysiologist who won the Nobel Prize in 1904, was actually studying the digestive secretions. Classical conditioning or the Pavlovian conditioning talks about learning in terms of associations within two stimuli or the association between two events. Classical conditioning, if you look at the Pavlovian device, that was more to measure the salivation. His classical experiment is a dog is presented with food and the dog salivates as a response to that food. This is the unconditioned stimulus, the food, a natural stimulus, and it's the unconditioned response which is the salivation, a normal natural reflex. However, what Pavlov did was that every time he gave food, alongside a bell rang. And over a period of time when the association between bell and the food was very strong, the bell in itself started eliciting salivation. Thus, the bell became a conditioned stimulus and the salivation as a response to bell was a conditioned response. We have another example of conditioning, the classical conditioning. There is a puff of air, it's put into the air and you blink. Now this blink is a reflex blink. Thus, the air becomes an unconditioned stimulus and the blink an unconditioned response. However, if an association is made between a bell or anything else along with the puff of air, what will happen? Even the other stimulus, be it a bell, starts to get the response of a blink of the eye. Thus, the bell becomes a conditioned stimulus and the eye blink the conditioned response. For him thus, in classical conditioning, the tone was eliciting the eye blink. That became the neutral stimulus earlier, became a conditioned stimulus now. And the conditioning trials led to the tone becoming a conditioned stimulus and the response becoming, the eye blink becoming a conditioned response. Thus, if we look at classical conditioning, it's talking about an organism making associations between two stimuli. A neutral stimulus that signals an unconditioned stimulus beginning to produce a response that anticipates and prepares for the unconditioned stimulus. Thus, in classical conditioning, the first stage becomes the acquisition stage, wherein the phase of associating neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus and the neutral stimulus coming to elicit the conditioned response. The second stage is also the consolidation of this classical conditioning. Classical conditioning also talks about extinction, which is the diminishing of the conditioned response. That is, the tone stops to get a response of salivation, or the tone stops to elicit the response of an eye blink. When does this happen? When the unconditioned stimulus is no more associated with the conditioned response. There is also spontaneous recovery. What is spontaneous recovery? It is believed that once the extinction has happened, that is, the conditioned response has stopped to give the response, if you give a period of rest and then give the conditioned stimulus, there is a conditioned response, even without any more associations being made. Thus, there is a learning which gets transferred. However, the intensity of spontaneous recovery is much less. We have a graphical presentation of this. We move on to the generalization and discrimination as provided in classical conditioning. Generalization implies that a response very similar to the conditioned stimulus gets a response of conditioning. For example, the bell may not be a specific bell, but all types of bell now start to elicit the response of blinking of the eye or salivation. Similarly, we can even teach or bring about a learning of discrimination, which is that I do not blink or I do not salivate for any bell, but only for a specific one. Thus, distinguishing between the conditioned stimulus would be discrimination, and inability to distinguish between a conditioned stimulus and similar sounding stimulus would be generalization. This was classical conditioning. We initially said that conditioning is of two types, the classical and the operant. We move on to the operant conditioning. Given by Skinner, while elaborating Thorndike's law of effect, he developed the behavioral technology, by which he gave the Skinner box. Now, Skinner box or the operant chamber is actually a chamber with a bar or a key that an animal manipulates to obtain a food or water or any type of reinforcer. It contains also devices to record the responses that the animal makes. Now, operant conditioning talks about associations too. However, the association here is not of mere events or stimuli. However, this is an association between a response and its consequence. So, operant conditioning, which is the radical behaviorism given by Skinner, talks about the factor controlling an organism behavior is the consequence of that behavior. It says that there is no need to hypothesize about internal processes. In fact, the only appropriate object of study is overt, observable behavior. Thus, the laws governing learning are via operant conditioning, and they are similar for all organisms. It thus talks about overt behaviors and the respondent behavior. Now, the overt behavior would be the act which happens on the environment, which produces a consequence. And the respondent behavior is the automatic response to the stimulus, which is getting a response or a consequence. When we talk about the behavior, it is learned through classical conditioning. Operant conditioning talks about learning new behaviors. The key concepts in operant conditioning are reinforcement and extinction. Now, reinforcement is the major crux of operant conditioning. By Zimbardo et al. 2006, it is actually any condition that follows and strengthens a behavior. It could be positive or negative. Positive reinforcement implies an event that occurs after a response, and by such occurring increases the likelihood of that response to happen again. A negative reinforcement in turn is the removal of an aversive condition. A negative condition is removed, and thus the likelihood of that response happening again is increased. Extinction here is very similar to classical conditioning, and the removal of a reinforcement tends to terminate the behavior or makes the behavior extinct. Thus, operant conditioning, while talking about positive and negative reinforcers, also talks about what kind of reinforcer would you like to give. It would be a primary or a secondary reinforcer. The primary reinforcer is based on natural biological needs or the drive. For example, food, water, oxygen, they would all be primary reinforcers. However, you might even go for secondary reinforcers, and they are the conditioned reinforcers. Which are they? They are not in reality based on natural biological need, but are certainly related to those biological needs. For example, money, praise, grades, they would all make for secondary reinforcers. Let's talk about reinforcement contingencies. Reinforcement is not just the presentation of positive or negative, primary or secondary. It is also very important whether that reinforcement would be continuous or intermittent. Continuous reinforcement is the reinforcement which is administered every time the behavior occurs. So it's very important in the initial part of learning of new behaviors. Every time a new behavior happens, you get reinforced. So it's a continuous reinforcement, but it has certain problems. Habituation, for instance, which means that the reinforcement over time loses its reinforcing qualities. Similarly, satiation, that is, the organism becomes so glutted with the reinforcer, it doesn't want the reinforcer anymore. Thus, it's important to occasionally even look for intermittent reinforcement, which is the periodic administration of the reinforcement. This maintains a behavior with fewer reinforcement trials. That's the good part of this reinforcement, and it's good for after the initial learning has happened, because it's very resistant to extinction. I will not give up the new behavior because I don't know when I might be just reinforced. That was in terms of continuous or intermittent reinforcement. It's also important to know the schedules of reinforcement. That means when will it be reinforced, whether it's a ratio schedule or a time or interval schedule. The ratio schedule is based on the number of responses before a reinforcement is administered. It may be fixed or it may be variable. The fixed is when the reinforcement is contingent on a certain number of responses. The number is constant. After you've made, say, 10 responses, you will be reinforced. And it has been seen that as you approach the 10th one, or as you approach the response which would be reinforced, it becomes much more frequent. The ratio could also be variable, where the number of responses for which a behavior will be reinforced varies. Typically, some average number is maintained over the trials. It is much more resistant to extinction again. We will also talk about the interval schedules. What are interval schedules? They are based on the amount of time between the reinforcement. When we talked about earlier, we were talking about the number of responses. Here it is just the time. It may be fixed interval or variable interval. Fixed interval is when the reinforcement is contingent on the first response following a set amount of time. So after 3 minutes, every 3 minutes you get a reinforcement. And again, when the time approaches the interval, the number of responses also increases. Variable interval would be that I will reinforce you after a certain amount of time, but this would be varied. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 5, it may even be 1. Thus, the typical variable interval would be when the amount of time is varied. It is uncontrolled in a manner if the setting is not controlled. Till now we talked about reinforcement. Now reinforcement is the one which increases the probability of a response to happen. But learning is not just increasing certain behaviors, it is also stopping certain behaviors from happening. The negative behaviors must be learned to be not expressed. That would have to be done by punishment or by the removal of positive reinforcement. Now what is punishment? It's an aversive event, a negative event that increases or the probability that the behavior will not happen. In other words, it decreases the behavior from happening. It's a very powerful controller of unwanted behavior. Sometimes you need punishment also. Now punishment, as we said, was any condition that follows and reduces the likelihood of a behavior. It may be positive or it may be negative. Now what is positive punishment? It's a condition that occurs following a behavior, reducing the likelihood of that behavior to happen. A negative punishment would be a removal of a desirable condition following a behavior that reduces the likelihood of that behavior to happen. Thus, not giving a carrot would be negative punishment and giving a spanking would be positive punishment. There are some things that one must remember in terms of reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior, while punishment always decreases the likelihood of the behavior. Positive means doing or giving something following the behavior, while negative means stopping or taking something away. Once more, let's just compare classical and operant conditioning. The classical conditioning is something which is associations, and operant conditioning is something which is in terms of reinforcement. Initially, we said that there were two types of learning. One, the behavioral theories, and the other, cognitive theories. In the cognitive theories, we'll briefly look into the theory given by Bandura. How did the cognitive revolution actually came through? It was realized by the Gestalt psychology that behaviorism could not explain all types of learning. Insight could not be explained, latent learning could not be explained. Thus Bandura came in to say that a lot of learning is also by observing others, by reading, not just by reinforcement or by associations. Thus, individuals, it was felt, also form certain mental representations of the behavior prior to the practice of the behavior. We mentioned insight learning. What is insight learning? It's the sudden perception of the connection of parts of a problem. Thus, the association just comes in. It's an aha experience where I just come to know the answer of a problem, even without trying it out, even without getting reinforced for it. What is latent learning? It was observed, especially by Tolman's experiments on rats, that sometimes, even without reinforcement, even without any associations, over a period of time, The person just learnt a behavior, which was felt was due to cognitive map, which might be formed into the brain of the individual, which formed the basis for latent learning. Thus we had insightful learning and latent learning. Let's move on. Let's see then how Bandura came up with his social learning. Bandura gave the social cognitive learning. We have discussed the latent learning, we have discussed the insight learning. And therefore the cognitive social behavioral learning talked about the role of awareness and the role of self-evaluations. There was a strict departure from behaviorism. They went beyond reinforcement. What did they say? They said, external reinforcement is not the only way in which behavior is acquired, maintained or altered, that is learned. We also do the learning by observing, by reading or by hearing about others' behavior. Thus, at some level, we anticipate consequences for our behavior. We just think about what would be the consequence for what I have done. Even for behaviors we are never engaged in, we do have some cognitive insight about what would be the outcome. Thus, Bandura's biggest contribution to learning theory was that new patterns of behavior can be acquired in the absence of external reinforcement. So I don't need punishment, I don't need a carrot or a slap. I can still learn things. How? Because I pay attention to what others do. I repeat their actions. I observe it rather than just directly doing it. There were certain basic processes of observational learning. The first one was the attentional process. That is, I attend to and accurately perceive the model's behavior. The model is the person who I am observing. The second is the retention process. That is, I remember what the model did. The third is the motor reproduction process, wherein I translate. I don't translate verbally, but I translate symbolically whatever the memories that I have about the model's behavior into my response pattern. And lastly, there is a remembrance of what I have done. Thus, they talked about reinforcement in terms of vicarious reinforcement. Vicarious is the one that my model gets, that I observe others getting. Thus, the vicarious positive reinforcement may happen or the vicarious punishment may happen. The vicarious punishment and the reinforcement are similar to operant conditioning. However, they are not happening to me. They are happening to my model, to my observed person. He also talked about self-reinforcement. That is the reward or the punishment that I give to myself for meeting or failing to reach my own standards. He talked about the triadic model of reciprocal determinism. That is, my overt behavior, environment, and my personal factors in terms of belief, expectations, and self-perceptions are all interrelated. My personal factors influence the environment influences me. And they in turn both influence the overt behavior. Thus, he was talking reinforcement in terms of self-regulation and my thought processes, my cognitions. He believed that we can exercise control over our behavior through self-regulation. We are not slaves to environmental influences in terms of reinforcement or association, as the behaviorist did. We have free will. The cognitions, the thoughts, the mental ability helps me, allows me to use previous experiences to foresee the consequences. The self-regulation allows me to choose the behavior which will help me avoid punishment and to move on to long-term goals. He was thus talking about the self-regulation and cognitions. His self-regulation was the most important personal factor. He brought reinforcement within me. he moved beyond just the environment. He was talking about self-regulation as it regulates some things but not others. Some things have to be from outside, some things have to be from within. To sum up, we have talked about the acquisition, the maintenance and the modification of behavior. And this has happened either from the external forms of reinforcement in terms of punishment or the positive negative reinforcement as given by operant conditioning, or it was happened through associations as given by the classical conditioning. We have also talked about Bandura, who in his social learning theory says that we also acquire behavior through my own cognitions, my own self-regulation. Thus, I would end by saying that reinforcement does play the most important part in my learning. This reinforcement may be in terms of associations, may be in terms of positive or negative, or through the punishment, or it may be my own self reinforcement, my own evaluation of myself. Thank you.